Powerful. It's the first time the Prime Minister's met his international colleagues since yesterday's pledge to hold a referendum on the UK position in Europe if he wins the next election. This morning he gave more details about what aspects of the relationship he'd like to renegotiate before such a vote. So where should we be in Europe? Here to discuss the issue now, Tim Aker, Campaign Director for Get Britain Out, and Peter Wilding, Director of the Centre for British Influence in Europe. Tim, for you first, what issues would you like to see renegotiated? Or is there nothing worth negotiating, just a straight out?
Well, it's straight out. That's a non-negotiable position for us. The EU leaders have made it painfully clear to David Cameron that he cannot get the renegotiation he wants. If he wants a simple trading relationship with the EU, then invoke Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, a 2-year withdrawal process, and we get a free trade agreement at the end of it. We're Europe's biggest market. They send more to us than we send to them. We can have a trading relationship. We can have a flexible relationship with the EU, but that only comes by leaving the treaties and leaving the European Union.
Peter Wilding.
Well, Tim is living in a fantasy land. I mean, it's extraordinary that he should say this thing. America, Sweden, Germany, Italy, Spain, France all want us to stay in the European Union. City UK produced a report saying if we left, £27 billion worth of tax revenue would be lost like that. That's almost the defence budget. We've got to be in it to win it. And Britain leads the European Union. We managed to create the single market, which is the world's biggest trading bloc and a highly successful one. We enlarged the single market to the former communist countries. Britain has created the modern European Union, and all we have to do right now is live up to the legacy that Margaret Thatcher gave us in the single market and John Major gave us in the enlarged single market, and be confident of our position in Europe and the world. And I think just getting out is cuckoo clock economy politics and is a fantasy world which should be rejected by the British people.
So just to clarify exactly where you stand, Peter Wilding, you back then the Prime Minister's confident, take it to the people, take a good deal to the people and get them to vote to stay in?
Absolutely, absolutely. Britain is a leader, not only in Europe, but through Europe in the world. For example, the most important thing we should be doing over the next 2 years is creating the EU-US free trade deal. That's what Obama wants, that's what we want, that's what the Europeans want, and we should be getting on with it. The idea of pulling out and becoming a kind of buccaneering pirate state in the modern world is not real politics. OK, well, let's just put that to Tim Aker. How can you negotiate the EU-US free trade deal if you're not in the EU?
Well, Peter's position is very bizarre. The EU leaders have said renegotiation is not possible. David Cameron was sent by Parliament to negotiate a cut in the EU budget, and he couldn't get that. If he couldn't renegotiate the EU budget, how is he going to renegotiate the common fisheries policy and the common agricultural policy?
OK, let's just hold that thought. Answer that question, Peter.
Easy. One of the key issues about repatriation is something called the Working Time Directive. The Working Time Directive, which everybody complains about in the UK, is now being redesigned by the European Commission, not because only the Brits want it, but the Spanish want it, and the Italians want it, and the Germans want it. Tim's position is ultimately totally defeatist. He doesn't think that Britain can persuade allies to achieve the reformed single market that David Cameron wants. This is rubbish. The common fisheries policy that he just described has been repatriated. The common agricultural policy is being changed. It once took up 90% of the EU budget. Now it's down to 30%. Why is that? Because we have led the negotiations.
Let's let Tim have a word, shaking his head.
Yeah, that's fantasy. The EU Agricultural Committee is discussing this week 8,000 amendments to the common agricultural policy. 8,000 amendments. If David Cameron is going to renegotiate our whole terms of membership in that slow fashion, well, he's ambitious for 2017. The EU is only going one way. It's going to more integration. You only have to look at what's coming from the European Parliament. They want more integration, fiscal union, banking union, supervision of state budgets. We want trade with the EU. The EU has trade agreements with a whole host of countries. It's just negotiated a free trade agreement with Japan. Is Peter suggesting Japan needs to be in the European Union in order to trade with it?
What he's not understanding is today's world is all about rules. Who makes the rules? The rules have to be made through international institutions. We're talking about the European Union as one. We're also talking about the United Nations as far as foreign policy, NATO as far as defence policy. You can't just stop the bus and get off in the modern world. You have to negotiate with your partners. This is what we're doing. That's why Britain is influential in the world, and we have to be in it to win it.
Tim?
Well, if we were so influential, then why did leader after leader get up yesterday and say renegotiation is not possible? We want a simple free trade agreement. It's what the great British public want, and we want to be asked before the next election.
Angela Merkel of Germany has said, and you can see that in City AM this morning, we're prepared to negotiate with the Brits. And why are they prepared to negotiate with the Brits? Because Germany and Britain share the same free trade, free market outlook.
But Peter, answer Tim's point about, there are countries which manage their economies perfectly well with trade agreements rather than membership.
Absolutely right. But the fact of the matter is, European Union is a big regional trade bloc. It's got £11 trillion worth of turnover compared to $3 trillion as far as Japan is concerned. We carry clout. We carry the clout to make the rules that make the jobs and the growth in this country work. And the fact is, if we were 60 million people trying to negotiate on our own, how do you think we would succeed compared to that of the weight of the United States and China and Japan? We wouldn't. And so we have to pull the levers of power where they are. And today's world, not Tim's world, today's world is about pulling the levers of power where they exist. And the levers of power are in Europe, are in America, are in Japan.
Peter Wilding, Tim Aker, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, let's get the business news. Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Simon. Carrie, good morning. You may remember an incident around 2 years ago when 77 million